ground, everything burns. Drones strike relentlessly. Supply chains collapse. Artillery reshapes the map hour by hour. The front line is alive, unstable, and one wrong move away from something much bigger. At the same time, the war spills far beyond the front lines. A shadow fleet vessel in the Mediterranean becomes the center of a chilling mystery. What really happened at sea is far more dangerous than it looks. Europe is quietly unlocks a colossal financial weapon, a decision so massive it redraws the political battlefield overnight. Billions are suddenly in play, trust is publicly declared, and a signal sent east and west leaves no room for misinterpretation. Then comes the missile threat. A new Russian system is placed on combat duty closer than ever before. Timelines measured in seconds, not minutes. Can Kyiv truly be reached before alarms even sound? Behind the scenes, an explosive revelation. Foreign nationals pulled into the war, death quietly confirmed, others missing without a trace. Recruitment, deception, losses, and diplomatic panic unfolding in real time. We break down all the details in our special edition of Hotspot. Heavy fighting is ongoing across several sectors of the front line. Ukrainian forces continue to hold defensive positions, push back enemy attacks, and deliver accurate strikes on Russian personnel, equipment, and supply chains. Drones, reconnaissance, assets, and artillery play a central role in influencing the battlefield, preventing the enemy from building momentum. Meanwhile, the situation around the front remains highly dynamic. A closer look at what is unfolding on the front line and beyond in our overview.
The armed forces of Ukraine continue to systematically attack Russia. On the night of December 19th, new explosions thundered in several regions of the aggressor country at once. Voronezh, Samara, Tula, Rostov, and Oryol regions came under attack, areas that play a key role in supporting the Russian war machine. In Rostov-on-Don, after the nighttime strikes, part of the city was plunged into a blackout. Just look at the view from the window. Vonvid district. Absolutely nothing, no one at all. Even the military base over there was completely shut down, all the lights turned off. Similar consequences were recorded in Oryol as well.
A missile just flew by.
Local residents reported 2 strikes in a row. The first strike hit the thermal power plant, the second targeted the transformer equipment. As a result, part of the city was left without electricity, and there was a risk of disruptions to heating and hot water. In the Samara region, the Toliatyazot plant, one of Russia's largest chemical enterprises and a leading global producer of ammonia, was attacked and is on fire. It was loud as well in the temporarily occupied Crimea. Ukrainian forces delivered a powerful strike against Russian military infrastructure at the Belbek airfield. Using long-range drones from the Alpha Special Operations Center, the Security Service of Ukraine disabled key enemy air defense elements, causing damage worth hundreds of millions of dollars. 2 long-range sky surveillance radar systems SVU were hit, as well as a 92 N6 radar from the S-400 Triumph system and a Pantsir S-2 surface-to-air missile system.
When we talk about the destruction of any anti-aircraft installation, whether it's a surface-to-air missile system, in this case the Pantsir S-2, which is a modernized version compared to the Pantsir S-1, it means it can operate in a wider range of weather conditions, let's put it that way. It was precisely in this direction that the modernization was aimed. Radar stations, all of these are elements of air defense. They cannot be replaced and they cannot be produced quickly. So in order to bring them back, let's say, to the positions where they were before, you have to take them from somewhere else. Accordingly, this is in any case a weakening of the air defense system. And in any case, it expands the opportunities for ground strikes.
In addition, a MiG-31 fighter with a full load of ammunition was hit.
The MiG-31 is not produced in Russia. It is a legacy of the Soviet Union. As of today, the Russian Federation does not have the expertise or the capability to produce these fighters. What makes it notable is that it can be upgraded to carry the Kinzhal missile system, a ballistic missile that is very often launched over Ukrainian territory during large-scale attacks.
Meanwhile, the situation at the front remains tense. The enemy is not slowing down and is trying to seize even a centimeter of Ukrainian land.
At the same time, they are suffering greater losses. Well, even compared to, let's say, the beginning of the month, which indicates an increase, let's say, in such efforts, as well as a rise in losses.
The enemy continues to assault in several directions at once, achieving local tactical advances but not a strategic breakthrough. According to the main intelligence directorate, Russian forces have advanced near the settlements of Dronivka, Nikanorivka, and Pankivka in the Donetsk region. In addition, there has been recorded advancement of the occupiers in the area of Huliaipol in the Zaporizhzhia region. The Pokrovsk direction remains the hottest spot. According to the General Staff, over the past day, the Russian army attempted to break through the defenses of Ukrainian units 46 times. Attacks took place in the areas of Krasny Lyman, Rodinske, Mirnohrad, Kotlin, Udakne, Molodetske, Filial, as well as towards Toretske, Novyi Shakhovyi, and Novopavlivka.
The Russian Federation continues its unsuccessful attempts to encircle Pokrovsk and the Mirnohrad agglomeration. Well, for now, they keep making these attempts. They want to break through to Khryshin in order to close the ring of tactical and operational encirclement around the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration. This settlement is extremely important from a logistics standpoint for our troops who are defending both Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad. If Khryshin falls and the enemy is trying to break through there, then logistics will become extremely difficult on the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad section of the front. In addition, the enemy is trying to encircle Mirnohrad itself in a smaller radius. The situation there is very difficult. We can clearly see that the gray zone, a contested and dangerous area, is practically already surrounding the city of Mirnohrad itself. And this gray zone fundamentally means that if anyone, whether a resident or an outsider, tries to break into the city, whether they want to enter for supplies or leave for safety, they are absolutely forced to do so under constant and perilous fire. So as of today, logistics in Mirnohrad rely mainly on the operation of drones, both ground and aerial.
Meanwhile, paratroopers from the 46th Separate Airmobile Podil Brigade of the Air Assault Forces, together with adjacent brigades, managed to destroy a mechanized column of occupiers that was advancing to storm the Pokrovsky direction. In the Lyman direction, Ukrainian defenders destroyed an entire regiment of Russians, thereby improving the tactical situation in the Lyman area. According to the military, the enemy is trying to enter the city. Fighters of the 3rd Army Corps, together with soldiers from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, were able to achieve this thanks to successful assault actions. In this direction, the enemy has concentrated its main striking force, deploying the 20th Army. According to Ukrainian military personnel, the force ratio in certain areas reaches 1:6 and even 1:10 in favor of the enemy.
Both the Lyman direction and Siversk are the eastern gates to the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk Federation. If we look at the map, we can see just how close these settlements are to Slovyansk, especially to Slovyansk itself. The capture of Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, as well as Drushkovka, is the last agglomeration, the last major agglomeration in Donetsk region that is controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces, and it is one of the objectives of the strategic offensive launched by the Russian Federation.
The situation in Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region is in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. Enemy units numbering up to 200 occupiers have been trapped in the city. Fighting continues, but the key point is that the enemy's logistics have essentially collapsed. All supply routes have been cut off and it is impossible to send reinforcements. The military emphasizes, this is clear proof that the Russian army can and must be struck, despite its numerical advantage. Ukrainian forces continue to hold strategic positions on the outskirts of Vovchansk, repelling enemy attempts to break through in key directions.
Ukraine's defense forces control the southern, eastern, and western outskirts of Vovchansk. Clearing operations are coming to an end in the settlement of Lymany, meaning the area is being secured. The situation is difficult, but fully under control. Despite the enemy's active assaults, they have not achieved any success. Overall, in the entire gray zone, our strike drones dominate both in the city and in the surrounding settlements. Fighting is ongoing with constant assaults and shelling from the enemy using all available weapons.
While heavy fighting continues at the front, the war is increasingly moving deeper into Russia's rear, into the areas where the question of its ability to continue its aggression is being decided. In the Rostov region, the oil tanker Valery Gorchakov was attacked. The vessel was located at the transshipment terminal of the Novoshakhtinsk refinery, one of the key elements of the southern logistics chain in Russia's fuel sector. According to Astra, after the strike, the tanker began to sink. The stern of the vessel was flooded almost up to the superstructure. The area was quickly cordoned off, and the tanker itself was surrounded by oil containment booms in an attempt to prevent a possible oil spill. The strike was not a pinpoint hit, but a systemic one. The wheelhouse and the hull of the vessel were damaged. Holes appeared in the engine and steering compartments, and a fire broke out. Valery Gorchakov is under sanctions from the US, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Switzerland. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the tanker called at ports in the occupied territories, participating in logistics that support the Russian war machine.
Ukrainian forces may have attacked a vessel from Russia's shadow fleet traveling through the Mediterranean Sea. Reports indicate casualties and in particular the possible elimination of Russian GRU Major General Andrei Averyanov, whom Alexander Nevzorov for some reason refers to as the head of Russia's military intelligence. Here are the details.
On the night of December 19th, the defense forces carried out a drone attack on one of the tankers belonging to Russia's shadow fleet, which was located in the Mediterranean Sea. This was reported by one of the Telegram channels citing Russian sources.
We are demonstrating that our means with which we can destroy Russian ships can be used anywhere. They can blow up a Varshavyanka-class submarine, and they can blow up tankers, even Russian ones in neutral waters. We are showing that the fleet, which was once almost dismissively called a mosquito fleet, is now proving its effectiveness, and we will see the results. I think this is just the beginning. There is more to come.
According to preliminary information, as a result of the strike, supposedly 7 people were wounded. Another 2 were killed. Among those eliminated was GRU General Andrei Averyanov.
An officer of Russia's main intelligence directorate, one of the department heads. He commanded military unit number 29155, but that doesn't really mean anything. Most likely, this is the unit that was engaged in sabotage operations. According
to media reports, Averyanov is known for shadow operations, espionage, and sabotage in EU countries.
Averyanov, according to our information, is the executor of many very secret and complex tasks that Putin personally assigned to him. And this is connected to such well-known incidents as the poisoning of the Skripals, the explosions at warehouses in the Czech Republic, in Bulgaria, and several others. Sabotage, liquidation of the aircraft that was carrying Yevgeny Prigozhin, along with his closest associates.
The range of strikes on strategically important targets for the Russians due to Ukraine's defense is expanding almost every day.
In order to significantly reduce the potential for using oil, gas, and so on, it is, of course, necessary to act from the very first directions. Reducing this kind of economic potential of the Russian Federation, and that means reducing the ability to earn money for the war, also means decreasing the number of tankers involved in the so-called shadow fleet.
Sanctions imposed on certain Russian vessels, unfortunately, do not solve the problem as a whole.
And in order to cover more and reduce this potential, the special services have become involved. Ukraine's special services, the defense forces of Ukraine. And here it should be said that the range has become very broad lately. Well, first of all, there's the example of this strike on that tanker. But it was also known, for example, about sabotage against a tanker operating off the west coast of the African continent, on the one hand. And on the other hand, for example, in the Caspian Sea. There are platforms there thousands of kilometers away, which our means couldn't reach before, and now I think they've already struck them for the 3rd time, and very effectively.
Strikes on the supply lines of the occupying army also have an emotional component.
this affects the Russians themselves, and it's also for our partners. Well, the Russians have greatly intensified their information attacks with disinformation against our partners and against us. Just think about how serious this operation is if it's possible to sink a tanker in neutral waters far from our shores.
A day before the strike on the tanker on December 18th, the Security Service of Ukraine carried out another successful attack, worth several $100 million. The attack targeted the Belbek airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea and relieved the occupiers of an aircraft, a MiG-31 with a full set of munitions and an air defense system.
Europe has found the funds to help Ukraine through its most severe financial crisis. The 90 billion euros package is not only direct assistance, but also a clear political signal to both Russia and the United States. Europe's partners believe in Ukraine's leadership, rely on the armed forces of Ukraine, and will continue to support the fight against Russian aggression, an aggression that now threatens the entire continent. More about that in the report ahead.
No betrayal after all? After many months of discussions and what was essentially a late-night vote, European leaders have finally decided to allocate funds to Ukraine.
Today we approved the decision to provide Ukraine with 90 billion euros for the next 2 years.
I am very pleased to announce that we have done it. We have reached an agreement that will allow us to meet Ukraine's financial needs for the next 2 years.
At the same time, the original idea was to finance Ukraine using frozen Russian assets. However, in recent weeks, the number of skeptics regarding this solution has been growing. That's why the EU immediately prepared an alternative solution as well.
Right from the very start of the summit, there were two options on the table. The first option was to take the frozen Russian assets and use them to provide a loan to Ukraine. And the decision that was made was to allocate funds, these 90 billion, and it's a loan from the European Union budget. That is, most likely EU bonds will be issued or something like that. I don't know the exact mechanism. I can't describe it. I'm not an expert. And the EU will basically give us this money as a loan.
Experts were quick to reassure everyone. The decision to provide a loan was dictated solely by Europe's reluctance to waste time, continuing to discuss the mechanism for seizing Russian assets threatened with simply leaving Ukraine without money for the coming year. At the same time, despite the term loan, analysts believe that Ukrainians will not have to pay it back. That is,
if Ukraine suddenly fails to repay the loan, then the European Union budget will cover this loan debt. Apparently, Europe fully understands that it will later have to make a similar political decision to write off these debts, because it can't. A defender country cannot defend Europe on credit. This means that if there is no fairness in these relations between Europe and Ukraine, in the future Ukraine will have no motivation in the event of aggression against Europe to act symmetrically and help the EU countries. We must be on equal terms. And
European leaders are increasingly demonstrating an understanding of this. Despite Ukraine not yet being a member of NATO or the EU, the West understands. In the war against Russia, they are united with Ukraine.
We have a simple choice. Either money today or blood tomorrow. I'm not just talking about Ukraine, I'm talking about Europe. And this is our decision. Ours alone.
At the same time, it is especially worth noting that Russia resisted such a decision as much as it could. Up to its traditional methods of directly threatening top officials.
Officials from one country threaten officials from another country with murder.
Notably, putting aside disagreements over the confiscation of Moscow's money, the participants voted unanimously in favor of granting the loan. Consequently, they even managed to convince Hungary and Slovakia.
Many believed that Hungary would definitely block this decision. Obviously, they found approaches to Orban, and most importantly, this is financial. We need to fully understand that an incredibly and profoundly important point to consider is that both France and Germany are indeed active and unwavering supporters on Ukraine's side in this ongoing conflict. In fact, the main donors of the European Union are the countries on which the financing of these smaller countries, like Hungary and Slovakia, depends. And when Friedrich Merz took office as Chancellor, he already strongly hinted that if countries that actively undermine European unity are claiming significant European funds, he will indeed actively and thoroughly reconsider this particular policy.
Analysts believe this became a turning point in the voting issue within the European Union, and now by indefinitely freezing Russian assets and essentially giving themselves another 2 years to make a decision, everyone knows how to act against those who will resist the collective position.
As for the reparations loan and the confiscation of Russian assets, it is clear that this process will proceed in parallel.
The fact that Europe managed to find leverage over individual countries is extremely important, especially in light of the prospects that will soon face the EU, experts say.
the realization that this is not Ukraine's war in Europe, but a war in Europe on Ukrainian territory changes the context and the understanding of the area of responsibility for European leaders.
And as is already becoming clear, this responsibility is not only for financial well-being, but also for the outcome of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And consequently, the era of looking to the US for decisions is over, and the time has come to act independently.
All Europeans understand that now there will be a new European Union without America. All European countries, except for a few that have decided to pledge allegiance to America, like Italy, Hungary, but there are only a few of them. All the rest have, without a doubt, in fact, de facto, let's put it that way, decided to create a new European Union with slightly different rules. And everything is moving toward the creation of a European Union with different rules, in which, in particular, there will be more manageability during wartime. Because previously it was assumed that America would be the one to fight and manage the war, but now it turns out that's not the case. And
the decision to allocate funds for Ukraine is perhaps the best demonstration that the West will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. In practice, proving that it has learned, and in the future, it will continue to overcome its problems for our common good.
For us, it is important that the European Union has fulfilled its commitments, which were not obligations, they were just words. These were moral commitments, not physical ones. The European Union, roughly speaking, has confirmed these guarantees. This is very important for us, for Ukraine in particular.
On December 17, Belarus formally placed Russia's Oreshnik missile system on combat duty. Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko announced during his address to parliament. Minsk presents this move as part of deeper military integration with Moscow, but in reality it signals a sharp escalation and a new layer of strategic pressure on Ukraine and NATO's eastern flank. The key question now is whether Oreshnik is truly as dangerous as Russian and Belarusian officials claim. Can the system really reach Kyiv in less than 2 minutes? How realistic are these timelines? What are the missile's actual capabilities, and how seriously should this deployment be taken? We'll break it all down next.
By the end of the year, the medium-range missile system with the hypersonic missile Oreshnik will also be put on combat duty. And we'll strike there with Oreshnik and see what happens.
We will respond, including with the possible continuation of Oreshnik tests in combat conditions.
Putin has been talking about his huge Oreshnik for a long time and a lot. But now the missile is mentioned not only in Kremlin speeches. After all, it seems the bunker dweller decided to share it with his best friend.
The first positions of the Oreshnik missile system have been set up. We've had it since yesterday, and it's now going on combat duty.
And now, interestingly, it's Minsk, not Moscow, announcing that the missile is going on combat duty.
Because if these words had come from the Russian president, it would have been perceived as an escalation of tensions, an increase in so-called... And in fact, it would have been a signal that the Russian Federation is withdrawing from the so-called peace agreements. And that would have automatically led to the introduction of additional economic sanctions by the United States.
Although about a year ago, Lukashenko was begging Putin for the little nut for his own security.
Please don't take this as some kind of impudence. I want to publicly ask you to have new weapon systems and above all the little nut deployed on the territory of Belarus. This would seriously calm down certain minds who are already ready to go to war against Belarus.
So did Lukashenko really manage to convince Putin to hand over the weapons after a year? Or is it not that simple here either?
This is purely a product of Lukashenko's own imagination. There is no objective evidence indicating the redeployment of these strike systems, let alone their deployment on the territory of the Republic of Belarus.
Lukashenko's statement certainly sounds serious, but in reality, there are no missiles there. And now all of this is starting to look more and more like a performance. But why are they putting on this show?
We can say that this is no longer a coincidence, but rather an attempt by the Russian Federation to exert military and political pressure on European countries with the aim of blocking the issue of possibly seizing frozen Russian assets in favor of Ukraine.
More than a year ago, Russia struck Dnipro with an Oreshnik ballistic missile. Now, it is reported that the flight time of a missile from Belarus to Kyiv is 1 minute and 50 seconds, to Warsaw 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and to Lithuania just over a minute.
Notice that the flight time is not just to Kyiv, but even more so to European capitals. It is precisely this thesis that is being promoted by the Russian side. This makes it clear that the Russian Federation is simultaneously putting pressure on Western countries, first and foremost on its European partners and on Ukraine at the moment when Ukraine is signing so-called peace agreements. Specifically, we are talking about territorial concessions from our country.
Another telling point is the serial production of these missiles. After all, as is well known, it does not exist.
Oreshnik is an experimental weapon of the Russian Federation. In other words, there is no talk of scaling up production, especially not on a scale that would allow the Russian Federation to deploy it on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the Russian Federation has between 4 and 7 of these weapons.
Meanwhile, while the bunker and potato kings are busy playing games with moving equipment around, Ukraine is making sure that no equipment is left in Russia at all. At the Belbek airfield, the security service of Ukraine destroyed a Russian MiG-31 and a whole bunch of other equipment worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
It turns out that the Russian side is not even capable of providing cover, let alone anything else. Key facilities, but even the Russian air defense system is unable to protect itself from Ukrainian strikes. That's the main point. So it's not even about the military aspect as much as it is about the informational, political, and economic ones.
And this is just the beginning.
Russia has recruited more than 200 Indian nationals to fight in its war against Ukraine, India's government has confirmed, according to BBC. Officials report that at least 26 of those recruited have been killed, while 7 others are still listed as missing in action. New Delhi is now holding negotiations with Moscow over the repatriation of roughly 50 Indian citizens who remain in Russia or occupied territories. So far, Indian authorities say they have already managed to bring more than 100 people back home. How these recruits were drawn into the war, what conditions they faced, and what comes next, our journalists have all the details.
Indian authorities have stated that Russia has recruited more than 200 Indian citizens to fight in Ukraine.
We have recently learned about new citizens who have been recruited into the Russian army. We have once again appealed to the Russian authorities to release them as soon as possible and to put an end to this recruitment practice. We once again urge everyone to stay away from offers to serve in the Russian army.
According to official data, 26 citizens have already died in the war and another 7 are missing. Dozens of appeals from Indians begging to be saved from the meat assaults are appearing online.
We were given an ultimatum: sign the contract or face 10 years in prison. We were deceived. They told us we would be working in the kitchen, but now they're sending us to our deaths.
We, 9 men, are trapped in the Russian army. We are treated badly, fed only bread and water, and forced to go to the front lines.
Indian Prime Minister Modi personally asked Putin during negotiations to allow Indian citizens to return home, and the Russian dictator promised to release all of them from service.
We informed our command that the Prime Minister of India is negotiating with the President of Russia for our release. But they don't want to listen to us. They are sending us to the front lines. Many here have already died.
Some were even sent back. And now the survivors are speaking out about the horrors of serving in the Russian army.
We were forced to take up arms, we weren't allowed to sleep, and we were constantly threatened. I lost all hope of ever seeing my parents, brothers, or sisters again.
According to Russian authorities, Indians joined the service voluntarily. But of course, that's not true.
We had no idea there was a real war going on between Russia and Ukraine. My brother was forced to sign a contract that was entirely in Russian. He didn't understand a single word of it. Once they held a gun to his head and said, either you fight or you'll spend 10 years in prison.
The Russians have created entire networks of recruiters who promise high-paying jobs, for example, in construction. But newcomers are immediately sent to the front lines.
The agent also told me that I would be doing loading and unloading work. But when I arrived at the address, I saw soldiers there. I told them that I didn't want to serve in the army. They threatened me, saying that if I didn't sign the contract, they would kill me. After that, they gave us a training that lasted only a few days and then sent us to the front line.
Putin publicly boasts about cooperation with India in the defense sector and of course would like India to take Russia's side in the war with Ukraine.
And of course, I would like to mention that Russia and India have traditionally cooperated closely in the military technical sphere. For more than half a century, our country has been helping to equip and modernize the Indian Army, including air defense forces, aviation, and the Navy. Overall, we are certainly satisfied with the results of the negotiations that have taken place.
But Prime Minister Modi insists India is a peaceful country. They are against war and will never support Putin's expansionist ambitions.
India consistently stands for global peace and harmony, just as we have steadfastly done from the very beginning of our nation's existence. We warmly welcome all constructive initiatives, every sincere effort aimed at diligently finding a truly peaceful, comprehensive, and long-term resolution to this significant international issue. India has always been ready to support such efforts, and we will also be ready to assist in this in the future.
All that's left is to lure Indian citizens into the war through deception and pretend that this in no way damages diplomatic relations.
At this moment, that's all from me, Maria Farafonova. Even more hellish Frontline news in our next episode. But for now, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon!